Okay, well, we're going to get
Hi,
started.
Jim. I see his
Yes.
comment.
Hi, Jim. We saw Jim. Yeah, so everybody, please use the Q&A. Please use that for the questions. And we're going to get started here.
Great.
Okay. So, hi again.
Hi.
All right.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, okay. So you didn't study photography in school.
Not officially.
Not officially. What were you studying, and then how did it turn into this?
I was studying art history. I went to college not really having any idea of what I wanted to do.
Me too. That's why I went to art school.
And I did discover art history, which I loved. And through that, I found photography because in one of the classes I took, I think it might have been my sophomore year or late my second semester of freshman year, quite early on, was a class called The History of Photography, taught by Peter Bonnell, and I was obsessed. I loved the class. I never wanted it to end. I was in the front row, every day. And I then took a seminar with him, and I really was just enamored with photography. I didn't think I knew then that I wanted to be in photography. I just didn't know if it was as an editor or a curator or a shooter, how that was gonna play itself out. I did do something at my school that was essentially a minor in photography.
Did you take darkroom classes and photo classes?
I did. I took darkroom. Actually, we had just gotten a digital darkroom at that moment. And so I did take a few photography classes with Emmett Gowan and Andrew Moore. So some incredible photographers. And but again, going through school, it wasn't an art school, and I really didn't know how it was going to play out. So I kept asking, I, of course, at a certain point, I decided I wanted to be the one taking pictures. But I also wanted my work to hang in a gallery somewhere, and I didn't, I also knew that I had to pay my rent. So the two didn't seem to
Didn't stop me.
So I actually got an internship at the Sunday Times in London one summer and was a photo editor there, and then eventually a photographer. And I sort of got the journalism bug there. And that's where I decided, you know what, to be paid to take pictures in any capacity is wonderful, but I would like to do it as a photojournalist right now. And that's how I got started.
So then after school, you managed to finagle a job at the New York Post. Was that how hard was that?
I finagled a job. I finagled an internship, and then I refused to leave. That's how this happened.
Did they start paying you at some point?
They did start paying me, but I started as an intern and I left 8 years later. The internship was 3 months and continued. And I had, it turned into, I did so many things at the paper. I edited on certain days.
What were your roles there?
That's in the beginning, I was just a utility at anything. I'd get the mail. I would, I did a lot of photo research for people. Occasionally gave assignments to some of the other photographers once I had my bearings. But I also was shooting, and mostly I went into the office every day. A lot of photographers, particularly because digital was just starting, didn't need to come in and dump film anymore. So they were filing from wherever, but I came into the office every day, which I loved. I loved being in the newsroom. And then they would send me out based on what news came in or what stories needed to be done. So sometimes it was a feature story, a chef or, a restaurant review type of thing. And sometimes it was, scaffolding had fallen, or breaking news, planes in rivers, as those tend to happen in New York. It was wild times. I learned
So
so many things there.
What skills did you pick up there that you are just like, these are like skills that are just rooted in me now that are so useful even today?
So I think I would say everything. I know that that's a very wide, broad statement, but still let me, I'll go backwards a little bit. When I graduated from school with my art history degree, and a lot of that was in, my knowledge was in the history of photography, but as a practical photographer, I knew very little. I mean, I was pretty terrible, let's be honest, but you got to start somewhere. So
we all, by the way, we all were terrible when we started.
Exactly. We all were terrible. And I think the reason why my editor at the paper brought me on full time was because I was willing to do anything. And I was really hungry at the, still really hungry in many ways, but he would give me any type of assignment and I would just say yes, and then I'd figure it out. So I really learned patience, first of all, being, working in news. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. I learned how to tell a story, visually, something narrative, how, I learned troubleshooting, because so often I would go in with an idea and then I'd have to work around what was actually in front of me rather than this vision I had. I learned how to work with a team. I loved my colleagues, and I also loved the other journalists out on the street. Sort of, there's a camaraderie there. And then more practically speaking, how I took what I learned from the paper and how it has sort of manifested now in my work is that my editor taught me to go, when I went on an assignment, and often I did 3, 4, 5 assignments in a day, I had to come back with sort of a variety of images because they didn't know how they were going to lay out the paper. So specifically at the paper, I had to do a headshot, a full length, in case it needed to be silhouetted, which is sort of my nightmare, to be honest. But I had my checklist of things that I needed to get. And it was also, an exterior of, let's say it was a restaurant review. I would go in, I was never told if the review was ever going to be purposefully, if it was going to be a good review or a bad review, so that my imagery was just as objective as possible. But I would go in and I would shoot people eating, sort of the scene, the ambiance. I'd have to shoot an exterior. I'd have to shoot the chef, a dish, some sort of reportage scene. I really had to do the whole thing and then move on to the next. And so I couldn't, some photographers like to work where they really they have one vision and they really nuance that one image until they're done. And that's not how I was trained, nor really how I like to shoot. I really like to move around and explore and see other things. So that definitely carries in.
You want to be part of the activity. You want to be part of the activity.
Well, I want
of it all.
Yeah, I want my photos to show what's happening, sort of what it's like to be in that room. And so to me, it's not, and I'm a portrait photographer, but I still don't sit and nuance just one image. I feel like when I get it, then I move on right away. And some other photographers just work, we all work in different ways. So really the short answer to your question is that I loved college, went there, got me into photography, but everything I learned about being a photographer, I learned at the New York Post.
There we go. And there's you. Okay.
There she is. This is a Cliff Hausner original, by the way.
Which?
That portrait of me.
Oh yeah, is it?
Yes.
Everybody's got one. Don't feel special. Everybody's got one.
I have several, I have to say. With the exception
I
of
actually
my
have
husband.
one of Cliff.
Oh, that's good. Well, with the exception of my husband, all my favorite photos he's made. Yeah.
Cliff's very good for that. So now I've got some pictures here from when you were shooting, at the Post, and was all this for the Post, and was some of it freelance? Were you able to do other things there too at the same time?
Well, not really. Yes and no. So I was a staffer, so my imagery was owned by the Post. And really, I mean, I wasn't really supposed to take other assignments, but I wasn't working for any competing. I wasn't working for the Journal or the Times or the Daily News,
Right.
more specifically their biggest rival. But I did, towards the end of my time there, start to freelance for magazines, and that was complicated because I was splitting my time between my shift, which was 10 to 6. So really I was taking assignments in the evenings, which is but was one of the, I did that for myself because when I was finally ready to leave, I had sort of the confidence knowing that maybe the phone would ring because it had rung before. And but the work that I started to get for magazines when I did eventually go freelance was a lot of the same work that I'd been doing at the end of my time at the Post, which was all the feature stories and portrait work.
Mm-hmm.
I should say that I also taught myself really how to light when I was at the paper. Towards the end, I did get to a point where I wanted to not just check those boxes for the paper, you know, and I would always deliver what they needed, but then I tried to shoot for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of how I managed to make my way out, because I felt like I had a point of view, and the phone rang a few times. So I was like, all right, I have a bit of a.
So how old was like Justin Bieber here? How long ago was this?
Oh, this is a long time ago. This is his right when he's starting out. So he must have been, I mean, I don't know how old he was.
That was a while ago.
Young.
And so it kind of brings us to the point of how long it took you. I mean, you were there 8 years, but how long it took you to begin to transition your way through, you know, these portraits and those things into other things.
Well, the first few years after leaving the paper, all I did was magazine portraiture.
Mm-hmm.
And also still shooting junkets, this sort of very specific style of shooting celebrities for wire services like AP and Reuters, where they would say, oh, this is a good story. I can tell you this story in a second.
Yeah, finish your sentence. I'll leave Bill out.
Well, just that I would get the occasional sort of longer feature story, but a lot of the work I was getting was to do these 5-minute portraits at junkets, where I would show up, I would have 5 minutes or 10 minutes with, you know, said person. I would have no idea what they were wearing, what room I was going to be in, what the light was going to be like, you know. And so I quickly had to learn how to get something in a very short period of time. And that was also pivotal to sort of creating my visual language. Like I have to go in and troubleshoot all the time now, and I just can do it very quickly. And I think I give that period of time the credit for training.
Yeah,
me.
the 5-minute portrait was somebody who doesn't have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Is a very difficult process, and you really have to get yourself buttoned up and have your bag of tools right there and ready for you, just so you can go, oh, let's do this or let's do that, and kind of know how it already goes. Otherwise, they're leaving before you got done what you need to get done.
So much preparation goes into it. It's always, I always chuckle at how much time I spend lighting a room or a situation, and then how many minutes I actually spend taking pictures in these situations. But this, what I love, the memory that comes up with this picture is that it was probably the biggest assignment I got when I first left the paper in my early editorial days. And I was asked to go photograph the president at the Clinton Global Initiative, his summit. But really what they asked me to do was just take some photos of him while he was speaking with a reporter. So basically, essentially being a photojournalist. And I said, well, I'm going to have 5 minutes with the president, then I'm going to see what I can do. So I
There you go.
brought my seamless. I had an assistant, which I really didn't work with very often. So it wasn't really was just an extra set of hands. And we walked in and we were setting it up. I kept taking photographs of the president while he was giving the interview, you know, following my assignment. And then when the time was up, I was going to ask him to come over and sit down on the chair, but he just got up and sat down in the chair. So I didn't even have to. And he continued to talk, and the reporter came over, and the president's body man's whispering in my ear. He has a meeting with the president of, I forget where, it was some nation, and he really needed to go. And I'm looking at the guy going, well, if he needs to go, then you can take him, but I'm not going to ask him to leave. And I made all these portraits, and he left. And that instance, so I sent the photos to the editor, and he was like, what? How did you get a portrait of the president? And I was like, I just did it. And that is exactly what I learned at the New York Post. Exactly.
There you go.
Just to get it done.
And then Brad Pitt. Now, this is beginning into the magazine stuff where you're starting to do other
this
portraits.
This is still AP. This is 7 minutes in the hotel room with Brad. Yeah.
Sorry.
I really, no, but I think it does go to show you, I did get very good at having my shtick when I would go into these junkets, and eventually, and I actually started to get quite, I would just say I wasn't experimenting. I wasn't growing at all as a photographer. I was sort of go in and set up exactly what I knew what worked. Actually, one of the images you showed earlier, the Brooke Shields image, that was a pivotal point in my career, because I was doing that. I was going in and doing my 5-minute portraits. I walk in and I'd set up my seamless, and I'd bring all these colors, and, you know, I sort of had a bag of tricks, and I would, all the different lights, and I would see what the scene was, and I would light it. And in this particular case, I rented lights. In this particular case, I remember going in and setting up my lights and going down to turn on my lights, and I hadn't charged them. So I had this sort of scene over here, and I had to fumble through my case, and I'm looking, and I was like, I'm so glad I brought my 1.2 lens. And I just played it cool and said, you know what, Miss Shields, on second thought, would you mind if we took an image in your dressing room? I have a different idea of how we could do this. And she was like, yeah, okay. You don't want to do anything over here? I'm like, no. And so I ended up making this image, which I really like. I always have. And I never would have made that image if I had charged my batteries, because if
everything worked.
Yeah. So I was just sort of in this, I was just sort of going through the motions. And then the Brad picture to me was when I really sort of stepped out of that, and I started pushing the boundaries more. On this particular shoot, I got there 2 hours early, and they put me in this ridiculous room. At least it had windows, I'm grateful for, and with no furniture. And so I was running around the hotel, knocking on hotel room doors going, hi, I'm doing a photo shoot over here. Do you have any furniture in your room I could have? And I found a chaise lounge, and then I was able to make this. And that was, that's how I sort of started growing in the world of getting the longer stories.
Started getting you to think differently, and realizing that they were willing to do other things too, because they were so used to just doing this standard thing also. And
yeah,
probably enjoyed
absolutely. That. Yeah. Not everybody is up for collaborating, but most people are. Some people are really just there to show up for their image, for their quick session, and they leave. But these are the one on the left is AP also, which is a recent photo actually. I still shoot portraits for AP. I love working with them. Such a it's a puzzle every time, and I get to sort of stretch that creative muscle. It's not always successful though. I can say that honestly. Sometimes I'm like, yes. Oh Lord, if you had given me 3 minutes or 5 minutes instead of 3, but so be it. And then the one on the right of Maggie is from Domino magazine. And that was all Maggie's idea. She's so collaborative. She comes in with so many plan or, thoughts and
She wants to do something interesting.
Yeah.
And Saoirse Ronan?
That's
Did I
AP.
pronounce that right?
Saoirse Ronan, you got it.
And so all that stuff then for AP took you to Sundance.
Yes.
For them, right? And
Yep.
you did that over a few years. And I remember when you started that process, and the in what you did and the tintypes and how you had no fear of going in there and doing something you've never done before that was so old in process and so complicated in process, but you were going to just go do it no matter what.
Yeah, I know when you say it that way, it does sound slightly insane.
Completely.
Yeah, it was, but I also felt confident enough that I was still going to follow through on my assignment. I was still taking my digital images, and sort of checking that box and making sure, the AP was getting what they needed. But then I said, I had been there for 4 years. And every year I try to do something different, and it's very hard to reinvent the wheel, which is Sundance is particularly difficult, I find.
They're going from place to place too with other photographers. They're not just seeing you; they're seeing 5 or 10 other photographers in the course of that period of time.
So they're going from one studio to the next, and I'm standing still and getting one, cast after cast after cast. So and I'm trying to make mine feel different.
These definitely do.
Well, I landed on the idea of tintypes. I had one made at Photoville by the people at Penumbra, and I thought I was enamored by the process. And I thought, okay, if they can do this at a festival, if I can figure it out, it's possible. The limitations I have is that I'm shooting for a wire service, so I have to file every day. So I can't shoot film, I can't. I had all sorts of grand plans, but I would always run into some sort of limitation because of the deadlines. And then I saw the tintypes. So I tried to learn as much as I can. I brought some lovely folks with me to help, and we just went out there and mixed the chemistry for the first time in the hotel room the night before. But my thought process was, if I made 10 plates, that would be a nice little body of work to come home with for myself. But it was, people were really into it, and I came home with many more than that.
And I could see those first 2 were the first time you did it. This is now the second time you did it.
Second time.
And boy, the quality got so much better.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
That is a matter of opinion. But
it is. Well, as far as a technical response.
Yeah, completely. The plates are far. Okay, well, we can be clear. I had no idea what I was doing, nor did really the people that I brought. But I had read a lot about it. I had watched a million YouTube videos, and I was able to troubleshoot. I mean, the internet is a magical place. When we were dealing with issues at Sundance, I would Google something, and I would find a forum, and it would say, try this, and I would try it, and it would work. I mean, it was a wild ride, because we're shooting all day for 6 days. It's so many people. So you really have the opportunity to try to, fix things. It's baptism by fire. But the second year, I brought the folks from Penumbra, who were the original impetus,
professionals. You brought professionals.
I brought the best professionals.
Ringers.
So they were really helpful, and the plates are much cleaner. Tintype purists, of course, think that the oystering and artifacts are considered mistakes. It's really interesting the type of response I get to both sets. Some people love one and hate the other, and vice versa.
And don't get me wrong, I actually love both. And I am really just referring to a technical thing, and that the other ones are quite lovely and have their own feel and a whole other thing going on with them too. I mean, they're quite lovely. And so you did the tintypes, and then you go back again, and because this wasn't difficult enough, you decide that you were going to go and do everybody in cinemagraphs because they have so much
for
time.
punishment. Yeah, so I did the tintypes for 2 years, and then the following year, I actually partnered up with Instagram and Esquire to do their, photo booth that year. And I really felt like, I felt that the moment was over for tintypes. Well, for tintypes and me, I should say. It had had its time, and I wanted to do the opposite of that, honestly. Part of it was because I was starting to be known as the tintype girl, and that sort of, I didn't mind it, but it was limiting and not really accurate at all, because even though I did learn the process a bit better, I was just I'm a portrait photographer, and I was using the tintype as a medium.
Right. So if I go online and I actually do a search for you, what comes up more than anything else are the tintypes. And that's how most people do just know you. And there is this. I was gonna. You're very good at answering my questions before I actually asked them, because I was going to ask you how you felt about that. But now that you've answered it, we can just keep going forward.
It didn't. At first, I thought it was great. Then it started to bother me. Then I just said, I'm more than that, and let me show you, basically. But so when I came to the cinemagraphs here, which I called moving portraits, I wanted to do the opposite of a tintype, which to me was something to do with new technology. And when I did these, the cinemagraphs were still somewhat new. Now we're all beaten to death with them every time we get on our social media. People were doing them. It's not to say I was definitely not the first person to do a cinematograph, but nobody had done it in a setting like this. A, really with celebrities, and B, not at a festival. So this one was a real challenge, but I loved it. It was a lot of fun.
They're fabulous. So these two things you shot here were very different experiences. How have doing these, it's really way out there, giving you new insight into making the images going forward? Or did you just kind of like, oh, that was fun, let me get back to what I normally do?
No, shooting tintypes changed a lot for me in the way I approached a portrait, because very often in my digital process, when I would shoot portraits, I would shoot through things. So sometimes I would be shooting a situation or a setup that I knew in my head wasn't necessarily, I wasn't there yet. But instead of saying, oh, this isn't working, let's move on, I would I'd try a few more things and guide them, and then I would, knowing when I'm clicking the shutter that some of these images aren't going anywhere. They're just, it's sort of to shoot through the process. With a tintype, I had the opportunity to shoot one plate of everybody at Sundance, with a few rare exceptions of people who were willing to stick around. So I could only hit the shutter when I felt I was ready. And that changed everything, because I did take a few where I thought, why didn't I just ask him to look left? And it's because I'm always gauging the room, and I'm as a portrait photographer, I'm trying to, it's a collaboration, and I'm seeing what his natural body language is, and should we put our hand up? So with the tintype, I had to start asking for those things. I'd say, all right, let's try this. Oh, let's keep working. Why don't we try this? Oh, that works, right? And I'm looking through my, a viewfinder. So it was a completely different way of working. And I had to basically find the confidence to sort of articulate what I needed, because a lot of times it's easier to just click the shutter and work your way there.
So, and then you decided that, or somehow you came to a decision that you were going to go from this portrait and photojournalistic background into advertising, probably because there's more money there. I don't know. But
I didn't really make the decision, I have to say. I decided along the way that I wanted an agent because I was slightly misguided in that. I just thought I needed an agent. You know, it was like the next step. And I started reaching out to everybody, you know, just emailing, and I was getting zero interest from some of the people that I really thought I would be a great fit for, and then some people were reaching out that I didn't know, and I sifted through it all and ended up with an agent. And that is what changed everything, because I didn't really know what commercial work was, to be honest. I just thought, this sounds fun, you know, but I really didn't have any idea what I was getting myself into. And my agent, who I have been with now for 10 years, basically held my hand through the process. And she said, I really believe in your work, and I think that there's a place for it in the commercial world, and this is how we do it. I really didn't even know what she was talking about when she was saying that. And so I sent her a lot of imagery, and she would just make these selects of my work that I was like, wait, what? You're going to use what photo? Where?
It's a good editor. It's a good editor.
She's a terrific editor. And that's how I made it into this side of the industry. She just sort of, I mean, I had no idea what was happening. Like this shoot, this was when I loved this shoot so much. It was my first broadcast directing job as well.
Sorry about that.
No problem. It was, this was sort of I would say maybe my first huge campaign, because it was a broadcast commercial and the print. And again, I was sort of wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and my agent was just, you know, what people are asking me questions. I'm like, I'm sorry, what's payroll? I don't really know what you're talking about. You know, and she's like, I got it. I'll handle this. You just stick to the creative. And that's really why our relationship has worked so well, I think, because we're a great match. And finding an agent, I thought, was just finding an agent, but really it turns out I speak to my agent on the phone almost every day, far more than I talk to my husband sometimes. So it really is a relationship, and she believes in my work. She didn't ever want me to go shoot something that's CGI, because CGI is really, you know, in right now, or, you know, she didn't ever want me to change my vision or chase the market, which I think is a blessing, because it's true.
What were some of the changes in the way you worked from before to now that really surprised you the most? I mean, because they're completely different worlds. You're totally out there with your camera and a list, and now you've got a team. Please. Yeah,
no, exactly. So the first thing is that the production size grows astronomically. There's producers, and there's talent, and there's makeup and styling and location scouts, and, you know, just this list of people I didn't know existed at the time. And everybody does their job exceptionally well, and everyone stays in their lane. But as a photographer, I had to start working with a crew, and that was a big change. I really had always worked by myself, mainly because, well, two reasons. The one is that the paper never had no budget for an assistant. And right. The second is that I was always intimidated by the fact that I really felt the assistants knew more than I did. And I didn't want to come across like I didn't know what I was doing. But it turns out I didn't know what I was doing.
Well,
really.
That's why their assistants are not photographers.
Exactly. Well, but learning to work with a crew and finding people that you work well with it's invaluable. I mean, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And my crew is like family to me at this point. We work, we sort of have a shorthand, you know, I can say something and they know exactly what I'm talking about, and it means no sense to anybody else, which is great when you're trying to talk about something around an art director.
I probably talk to your digital tech more than I talk to you.
It's true. It's true.
You know, he calls and he takes care of everything for you. Thank you, Dustin.
Yes, thank you, Dustin. He is, well, that's the beauty of it. He takes care of the technical sides of that, and I get to focus on being the creative, and that's really is that's the goal, I think. And advertising, yes, there's more cooks in the kitchen, and you're working towards sort of a shared goal, whereas often when I was shooting by myself, I just was gonna shoot whatever came to mind. And working in a group like that is something you really have to learn, I think. It's being able to filter the noise, sort of, because there's a lot going on, but you also have to make the imagery look the way you want it to make while still taking into account everybody's asks.
So recently, and I'm going to show a handful of Carhartt pictures. You got Carhartt. How long did it take you to get Carhartt as a client, and the things that were unique and special to it?
So when I first started working with my agent, she said, okay, now you need to go do a personal story. And I was like, I'm sorry, a what? She's like, what do you shoot for yourself. And I'm like, what? I haven't done that in years. I really had just been going from assignment to assignment to assignment, which was to my own detriment, to be honest. And I was so nervous. I didn't even know what to do, because when left to my own devices and no parameters, it's almost too overwhelming for me to sort of lock in on one concept. So one thing that happened is that I went on a pack trip with my in-laws. So I married a cowboy, who's now a photographer, but
we can go back to him. We can go back to him, actually.
Let's go back to him. So I went on a pack trip with my uncle-in-law, and he's a cowboy. So he's the guy you call out in southwestern Colorado when your cows have gotten away and are up in some very treacherous place and you can't go get them. So they send him, and he will come back with your cows. So we went in, there were 4 of us, and 5 of us and 4 horses, so 9 horses total, and 4 of them were carrying food. And we went on this journey, and it was really fun. And I also grew up riding, so this was not totally, I was not totally out of my element. Although they, being from the East Coast, thought I was like, City Slickers, Billy Crystal and City Slickers. So
you rode side saddle,
Yes, I'm like Norm. So we ride into the San Juan Mountains, and I started to notice that while we were packing up, while we were preparing, doing everything, and then riding, that everyone was head to toe in Carhartt. So I just started taking pictures. I was going to shoot the trip anyway, but I started shooting it from my perspective, which to me was, if I was shooting a campaign for Carhartt, what would it look like? So I ended up shooting this trip, sent it to Carhartt, and heard nothing for 4 years. But in those 4 years, I was constantly sending them new work, and trying
on the radar,
trying to be somewhere on their Rolodex. And then eventually I finally made the connection, and it's been I would say my dream, it's their dream to work for, because I really get to shoot the way I love shooting. We shoot real people doing what they do. So in a way, I'm a photojournalist, or it comes from that side of my brain. By no means, I'm dressing them, I'm telling them where to stand. If they ride a horse down a ridge, I'll say, can you ride down that ridge again? No, I'm not a photojournalist, but my approach to the narrative, and
you're still shooting portraits with them? So you're still shooting, a full body, maybe a headshot. You've got these, you still have those series of things there.
Yeah, I still do that. I still roam around. I'm trying to look for something I haven't seen before. I always try to shoot a portrait of every person. I've actually, I've done sort of in the same vein as the tintypes. I will go and shoot I've been shooting Polaroids of all of these folks, and I've made little books for
Still a
them.
Polaroid?
Still a Polaroid, and a lot of the Fuji. But so I sort of will add on to even Carhartt. I just sort of add on to the projects for just a little something special. I mean, it's for me, but it's also for these people. I always try to send it to them as well.
And then, so then after Carhartt, now you've gotten yourself into Netflix and Hulu and some television, and I guess that actually stems back to a lot of the AP shoots where they begin to actually know you now too.
Yeah, so I did the lifestyle advertising sort of built up, and I really didn't do any entertainment, meaning I was never hired to shoot a celebrity for an advertisement. I only really was shooting, you know, recognizable people for magazines, and then I got one Netflix job, which was amazing, and I really didn't know what that was either, to be honest. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to shoot a movie poster or a TV poster? You know, in the same way that I really didn't know what commercial work is at the beginning. I'm like, this is so great. I know I can do it, but I don't really know what we're talking about here. And now it's where I spend a lot of time, and it's really combined, you know, all my I would say my wheelhouse, but I have several wheelhouses, as it turns out, because lifestyle and entertainment are very different.
So now I have one question, and then we're going to get to the Q&A in 1 second. So did you find it difficult to change from being a journalist to being, now you're more of a business person, as a advertising photographer? So it's, yes, there's a creative, but a lot of that's being given to you and you have to make from it, but you have a lot of now business responsibilities, and it's a very different mindset.
I definitely have a lot of help when it comes to the business side of it. I mean, I didn't have a choice anymore. So here's an example. I was always really terrible about sending invoices, for example. A lot of photographers are. I would just wait. I don't know why I was scared to ask for my money that I'd already earned, but I would wait weeks and weeks and weeks. You can't do that in advertising. So it really sort of just like sharpened me up, my skills, and was like, you just got to deal with this. But I work a lot with a producer who will handle a lot of the financial side and the budget side. That's a whole new world, but I think it's made me realize how photographers have to be so many things. I have to be budget conscious, you know, you have to be, and dealing with taxes is a whole other thing. You also have to write book reports, because I have to write treatments all the time, which feels like I'm, you know, there's so many sides of photography that I never anticipated having to. I mean, graphic design, for example, an area I really didn't think I was ever going to need to know. And I have to work in design exactly. I'm in design all the time. So working as a photojournalist, I really needed to know photo mechanic, Photoshop, and my camera's inside out, and how to be, you know, be safe, be in the right place, the right time, kind of, you know. I'm definitely dumbing that down a bit, but there's just a whole other side of the industry and that's the business side that was, in the beginning, I was like, what is this? So
we're gonna, Anthony's gonna come back in a second, I think. We're gonna get to the Q&A from the audience, and there's Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, John.
Hi, Anthony.
And he's gonna do the questions from the audience, and then I have a quick little thing for you at the end.
All right.
So we got a hello from Jim Reed and Brianne Aho, just in the regular chat, so I wanted to pass that
Hi,
along.
Brian. Hi, Jim.
And then we got in the Q&A section, KT asks, why are you so awesome?
That's just my work husband giving me a shout out, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin.
It's a skill. It's a skill, right?
Go.
Yeah.
We have one, it's from anonymous attendee, which is strange because all the chat people have names on them. It says, where did you go to college?
I went to Princeton.
All right.
Not an art school, as you know.
It's not a bad school either.
No, it's a great school, but it's not an art school. It's not an art school. That's another conversation about. We can have another forum on that, on art school.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Seshu asks, good to hear that there is life beyond photojournalism. What motivated you to move more towards portraits and then more recently advertising work? While the money can definitely be good, is there anything else that directs this new mission?
Great question. I honestly didn't get into it for the money. Now that I'm here, I'm really, I like that side of it. I'm not lying here. This is, but I really didn't. It was because I needed to grow. I'm constantly want to grow as an artist and as a photographer. And the portraiture, that was a natural progression. I really had learned to light, and most of the magazine shoots, even if there was a reportage part of it, included portraiture. So that sort of flowed naturally. Going into the advertising, it was just about having more opportunity, I think. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about really what I felt. And I think it was, I'd see in the subway in New York, the advertisements, and I would always just stare at them, be like, I would love to shoot that. There's some really beautiful, very moving campaigns out there. And I thought, I'd love to do this. Some of it was so overwhelming, even looking at a Nike campaign, I would be like, how did they do that? And then I wanted to learn. So that was really how, because I wasn't going to get hired. I do believe you have to make the work you want to get hired to do. So that's where my personal projects came into play. And I would do these, the Carhartt or any sort of lifestyle shoot. And my aesthetic would sort of match the brands I wanted to work for, or you would hope. My aesthetic isn't what Nike's looking for, and that's okay. If Nike ever wants something that has a gritty photojournalistic style, they'll call me. So it's sort of that was something I needed to learn. And I think as a photographer, just finding your visual voice is the most important thing. That first and foremost, and then the phone will ring, and it will ring because they want you to do that thing. So it might be photojournalism, it might be advertising. There's no reason why it can't be all of those things.
All right, cool. Jim Reed.
I just say hi, Mari. In the chat.
Okay.
There you go.
It's all good.
Jim Reed asks, what is your favorite type of photography?
Wow. Well, that's just mean. I think to shoot, I think it is, oh man, that's tough. I love working with people, so interesting people. So I love shooting stories where maybe it's a portrait story, but that has a fashion element, where we're changing clothes and locations over the course of the day, where I really get to know somebody. I love that. I love narrative work in that way. But I love looking at photojournalism. So there's that. I really still spend a lot of time just absorbed in my books. So
the answer is kind of yes.
I know that's a ridiculous answer, but I mean, but but for even if it's a story for a magazine, or I'm shooting 7 different sets to do a Netflix key art, if it's an interesting person and a collaborative idea, that's what I love. I mean, I think, but I guess who doesn't love that, really? I mean, I just love people that want to try different things.
Another question from the anonymous attendee: do you use mostly natural light being a photojournalist?
I do use a lot of natural light, but only in that's where I begin. I supplement very often, but my intent is that even if it is lit, you don't know as the viewer. So it's sort of ninja lighting in that way.
Nice.
But yeah, I always start like, where's the window? What's going on in this room? Because I do want my work to feel natural. For example, if I want it to look like hard noon light, then I will look for that and then, supplement light around it to open shadows and whatnot. Or if I want it to look soft and backlit, same thing. I just look for, what's happening where I am.
Yeah. Brian Aho also asks, do you do your own post? And if so, what software do you recommend? Also plugins.
Okay, great question. I do all my color. That's sort of my other love right now. I really love taking the image and turning it into what it was in my head when I took the picture. I don't do I do a little bit of skin work, to be honest, but the same thing, my philosophy is the same for post. I don't really want anybody to know that I did anything to it. I want it to be very, to still look natural. I do a lot of skin, not the really tricky stuff. I send that out. Absolutely. I've got lots of, I'm always asking for help, especially when it comes to anything past comping, because I have no interest in really knowing those skills well. I'll leave that to the experts. I have played around with, I have to think of it, alien skin, exposure for color. It's a whole bunch of, film, filters, essentially. I also, for skin, I don't really use any plugins for skin, but I do know that there's one called Portraiture that I have used for when I need to send out a contact sheet really quickly to a client for, headshot, and I don't have time to go in and retouch everyone. So it kind of just puts this glow to them, but you can adjust the opacity and whatnot, so it's not, to your liking. So I'll use something like that. I have in the past, but on an image that's going to go in my book or to a client, I would never use a skin plugin. And try to think what else. I don't know that many others. I think those are really the two. I tend to spend most of my time just tweaking in Photoshop.
All right.
I'm old school. I have to say that the commercial world has never heard of Photo Mechanic. And Photo Mechanic, for those of you who don't know, is an editing tool. I mean, really, it's for organization and batch captioning. It's a photojournalism tool. And I still use it to this day, to the death, even though my digital tech and John would shake his head and go, what are you doing?
I get questions of whether this or that will work with Photo Mechanic every week. We get that question all the time.
Yep.
And it absolutely has its values of things. It's so needed great. Much less in advertising than it is in photojournalism, but yes.
It is. Totally agree with that, but it still has its place, much to my digital text chagrin.
Dustin, if you're there, you could chime in.
Margaret Fox said, Photo Mechanic is awesome, and I totally agree. That's like the one, when my tech will come to me and say, there's this new way that we can do X, Y, and Z, and I'm always game to listen because I'm not doing any of that research, and that I definitely want to know, but sometimes I'm like, it ain't broke, don't fix it. So.
All right, we have 6 more questions, so we're gonna move through these a little quicker. Seshu asks, sounds like Victoria worked her tail off in every situation. However, did having a well-known father help or hinder her progress in the photography business? Did it open doors for her?
Definitely opened a door in the very beginning, because that is how I made my introduction to the paper, or the Sunday Times. That was he helped open the door to my very first internship. And then after that, I would say that no one ever knew. I never mentioned it and never came up. It's not, it's just like where you go to college in photography. It doesn't matter, you know, it just doesn't. It's great if you.
I can tell you after knowing Victoria for, I don't know, 10 years or whatever it is, one of the things one of the reasons that I've decided to do this conversation today is that here's a person who has worked and they've really just done all the work. There's been no help, no support. No, they've just done all the work to make that transition from figuring out how to get into it and what they wanted to do and just working their way through it and where she has now ended up. And it's something that has always been quite impressive.
Well, thank you. I do think that first initial foot in the door, I mean, that's
but
huge.
Everything's that way. So every place is that way.
Yeah. So, no, it's interesting. I have photographed over the years some people that my father knew or was friends with or potentially not friends with. And I've always thought about occasionally after the shoot maybe saying something, but I never have. Oh, I've one time with Bryan Cranston because he's a huge baseball fan. And after the shoot, I said, "It was a pleasure meeting you. It's always nice to be in the room with another baseball fan." And he was like, "How did you know that?" And I said, "Well, my father wrote a book," and they had a correspondence at some point. And he was like, "What?" But that was the only time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Brian had another question. I might have missed it, but did you seek for an agent or did they find you? If they found you, where did they see your work?
No, I was seeking them out. I had an email list of every agent under the sun. I mean, I didn't even really know who some of them were other than looking at their website. And I was just sending email blasts. And so it goes with those. I would, send an email out to 600 people and I get 2 responses. And all at the same time, I think I had 3 or 4 people that were emailing me and sort of interested, or maybe I think they were just feeling me out. And I went and met with everybody. And in the end, I really had it narrowed down to 2. And what I had done was, and also I would say of the 4, maybe the other 2 suddenly weren't as interested, but I really had it narrowed down to 2. And I actually called other photographers on their roster and asked them some questions. And that's how I ended up with my agent. But she emailed me and said, "Oh, I'd love to meet you. Next time you're in LA, let me know." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm going to be in LA on Friday." And she's like, "Great, let's have lunch." And I then booked a ticket because I was not planning to be in LA, and I just thought I needed to seize the moment. So, yeah, it's really funny. I'm not sure if I've ever told her that. Maybe she knew.
She may know now.
Yeah, exactly.
Kevin Russo asked a similar question to what we had before. In regards to the commercial work, are you doing the post-processing or handing it over to the client?
Ooh, so the entertainment stuff, I just say a prayer and hand over a drive. That's happens a lot. What I tend to try to do is put my color spin on everything and process them all out and sort of guide. But what happens in entertainment is it's like, that's another ball of wax. When it comes to more lifestyle and portrait campaigns now, I try to be in charge of it, or at least oversee it. If it's not if I'm not doing it, then my retouchers, or if it's their in-house, I still sort of try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening.
Gotcha.
But I try to be, I try to be flexible. I'm not one of those, if they need to do it in-house because it's going to be easier for the client, then I'm trying to make it easier for them.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. Brian asked, who inspired you as a photographer?
Oh, another tricky question. Oof. I have so many. I mean, Avedon, Pen, of course, but I first really decided that I wanted to be a photojournalist remember I took the history of photography. So everyone I learned, I was like about Frank and Winogrand. But then I saw a photo that Carolyn Cole took. She's a LA Times staff photographer. I don't think she was at the time LA Times when she took it, but an image of dead bodies that were covered in lye from covering the Civil War in Liberia. And I remember gasping at the image because I thought it was so beautiful, but it was so dark and it was obviously of death. And I just sat with it for a long time and asked myself questions like, why am I so drawn to this? Partly because how can you make something so grim, so beautiful, but also she was really bringing the humanity out of those individual people there. I mean, it's such a beautiful image. And I thought, all right, this is what I want to do. There's sort of a sense of purpose there. And oftentimes when people leave journalism, they think that they are selling out or, they're going to lose that sense of purpose. But I, A, didn't find that, and B, I still occasionally shoot journalism. So I really haven't had to give that up. It's taken some time for me to go backwards a bit, or back in time. It's not backwards, it's definitely forwards, but I've recently done something for National Geographic. I'm still sort of entering that realm. But, and of course my husband Lucas, who's also a photojournalist, but he's amazing.
So actually, Brian mentioned in the comments, thought you might say Lucas.
He's inspiring in so many ways, Lucas. But he didn't get me into photography. We met on an assignment. So
because of photography.
Because of photography, yeah.
Armin Wallace asks, was I a good assistant?
Yes. Yes, you were. Very much so. I was actually thinking about that the other day because I remember my favorite assistants are ones who are willing to have a conversation with me and talk it out rather than me saying, I want it to look XYZ, just set it up. It's, hey, do you think this would look good? What's your opinion? I mean, there's a reason why I bring people into my inner circle is because I trust their aesthetic opinion and, and their judgment. So yes. And I remember we worked through that lighting situation for the Ben Stiller image, which I love. And that image wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that conversation.
Nice. So the last two things aren't really questions. Brian says, same, both Photomechatic and Photoshop, haven't converted, just my workflow.
Such a good workflow.
And then says, thank you.
says no one ever except the two of us, but that's okay.
Seshu says, thank you very much for today's presentation. So
okay. I've got, sorry.
Thank you for being here, you guys. I really appreciate it.
So I'm going to do a couple of quick announcements, and then I've got 10 questions for you. 10 quick one-word questions. So
great. Okay.
So give me 1 second to do these. So PhotoCare will be reopening on Monday, June 8th from 10 to 4. It'll be curbside pickup only. So if there's something you need, just call in and somebody will be there to help you. And we're all looking forward to it. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, the Sony Workflow seminar has been rescheduled from the other day, has been rescheduled to tomorrow at 4. And next Thursday, maybe, because I don't have a confirmation yet, hopefully I'll be talking with Gary Land about sports photography or baseball or something like that. We haven't figured that out yet, so I'm waiting to hear back from him. Now,
very nice.
10 questions to finish.
Do it.
These are one-word answers.
Okay.
All right. So.
Okay, I'm ready.
And this is going to be a little different for you. So, how old were you? How old were you when you started shooting?
16.
And do you have a special photo teacher or photographer who taught you?
Yes. You would like the name?
Yeah, well, unless you're worried about insulting somebody.
Special.
You can name 2 if you have to.
Okay, we'd say Rentis and David Rentis, who was a colleague, it's not one word, was a colleague at the paper, and so many helpful people along the way. I'll just stick with him.
Okay. What is your favorite camera?
Ooh. Right now, the Q2.
Okay. And what focal length do you like the best?
On that camera, I'm shooting 28, but on my Canon, 50. I'm a 50 mil.
You're normal.
And my Hasselblad, 50.
Normal,
yeah.
you know. Yeah. Do you prefer film or digital?
Digital.
Color or black and white?
Color.
What was the coolest location you've shot at?
Cheating. I got to rappel down the side of Rockefeller Center once.
Nice. Okay. What this question
That's the New York Post for you. They'll send you to the weird places.
This question you're gonna have a hard time with. Who is your favorite photographer?
Impossible. I'm looking at impossible. Favorite?
Pick one. Comes to mind.
You've already said. I've said so many. I'm gonna say Paolo Roversi.
Nice. What is your biggest influence? Doesn't, could be anything.
Biggest influence, yeah. So tricky.
Look at your screen.
Sorry, I'm brain.
No,
I'm
read.
deep in my.
Oh, you missed it.
Oh, I see it. My children.
Trying to help.
I would say, but professionally, I think my children, I have actually started shooting them more through this COVID isolation, that I really wasn't looking at them in the same way. That's been interesting, but I think it's just the people I surround myself with. The people are I learned so much, and I'm so inspired by everybody.
And last but least, if you could do anything else, what would it be?
I would be
If you say fireman, I'm gonna be upset.
No, I would have a dog rescue. That's what I would do. Because I've said this before, and it sort of dawned on me later in life, there never was a plan B. So I always, there never was. I just was like, I'm gonna be a photographer, and and maybe that's, luck, privilege, hard work, whoever wants to think of it in any way. I just sort of set my eye on the prize. But I have said that I would either. That's a
one-word answer if I ever heard one.
Right? Yeah. We'll just stick with dog rescue. I used to say dog breeder, but now I know the error of my ways. Rescue.
I thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun. I always have fun talking to you. Everybody, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys very much.
And hope to see you soon at the store. And thank you again.
I'll be in now that you're open. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy our conversation. So, and thanks to everybody for coming and listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.